It was a foggy night in mid-October when my friends and I decided to sneak out for a hike. The allure of adventure beckoned us into the darkness, despite the chilly tendrils of fog wrapping around us like ghostly fingers. Our group consisted of Matt, the confident leader, Sarah, his devoted girlfriend, Kevin, the mischievous jokester, Emily, Sarah's loyal best friend, Jake, the reserved observer, Olivia, the athletic daredevil, and me, Alex, the reluctant participant and narrator of this tale. We met at the old oak tree on the outskirts of town, the designated meeting spot for our clandestine excursions. The moon, hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, cast an eerie glow on the fog-shrouded landscape. Our excitement was palpable as we exchanged hushed greetings and furtive glances, eager to embark on our nighttime escapade. "All right, everyone ready?" Matt asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, let's do this," Kevin exclaimed, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Shh, keep it down," Sarah chided, casting a wary glance around us. "We don't want anyone to hear us." With a collective nod, we set off into the darkness, our flashlights cutting through the fog like beacons in the night. The forest seemed to come alive around us, the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl adding to the eerie atmosphere. The trail was narrow and winding, illuminated only by the feeble beams of our flashlights. Roots snaked across the path like gnarled fingers, threatening to trip us with every step. Despite the treacherous terrain, our spirits remained high as we forged ahead into the unknown. After what felt like hours of trudging through the dense forest, we reached a small clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. We paused for a moment to catch our breath, the silence of the night enveloping us like a heavy blanket. "This place gives me the creeps," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "Don't be such a wimp," Kevin teased, nudging her playfully. "We're out here to have an adventure, remember?" "Yeah, but this feels different," Sarah interjected, her brow furrowed with concern. "Like we're being watched." We laughed off her words, dismissing them as nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted in each of our minds, a nagging feeling that something was amiss in the darkness. Determined to shake off our unease, we pressed on into the heart of the forest, the trail winding ever deeper into the unknown. The fog grew thicker with each passing step, obscuring our surroundings and heightening our sense of isolation. As we trudged through the dense undergrowth, our senses on high alert, a faint glimmer caught my eye. I raised my flashlight, illuminating a small clearing ahead of us. What we found there would haunt us for the rest of our days. Strewn across the forest floor were the remnants of a grisly scene, a trail of blood leading into the darkness, a gleaming knife stained with crimson, and a torn dress discarded among the underbrush. The air grew heavy with tension as we surveyed the scene, our hearts pounding in our chests. "What the hell happened here?" Matt muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like this," Olivia said, her eyes darting nervously around the clearing. "We need to get out of here." But despite our mounting fear, a morbid curiosity compelled us to follow the trail of blood deeper into the forest. With each step, the darkness seemed to close in around us, suffocating us with its oppressive weight. We walked in silence, our footsteps echoing eerily through the stillness of the night. The trail twisted and turned, leading us ever deeper into the heart of the forest, until at last we reached the edge of a vast, murky lake. And there, on the shore, stood a figure. A lone man, his back hunched with effort as he struggled to push a body into the dark waters below. We watched in horror as he grunted with exertion, his movements clumsy and furtive in the moonlight. "What the hell is he doing?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know," Matt replied, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "But whatever it is, it can't be good." We stood rooted to the spot, transfixed by the macabre spectacle unfolding before us. The man seemed oblivious to our presence, his attention consumed by the task at hand. But then, as if sensing our gaze upon him, he froze, his head snapping up in alarm, and in that moment our eyes met, his filled with a primal rage, ours with unbridled terror. "Run!" Matt shouted, his voice ringing out through the stillness of the night. And with that we turned and fled into the darkness, our hearts pounding in our chests as we raced through the forest in a desperate. The sound of our footsteps echoed through the night, the forest closing in around us like a vice. Branches clawed at our faces, roots threatened to trip us at every turn, but still we pressed on, driven by fear and adrenaline. Behind us we could hear the man's heavy footsteps, growing ever closer with each passing moment. "Keep going!" Matt shouted, his voice raw with exertion. And so we ran, our breath coming in ragged gasps, our hearts pounding in our chests. But despite our best efforts, the man was gaining on us, his presence a looming specter in the darkness. And then, just when it seemed as though all hope was lost, we burst through the trees and into the open, the lights of civilization shining like a beacon in the distance. With one final burst of energy, we sprinted toward safety, our lungs burning with exertion, our bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. And then, at long last, we stumbled into the clearing, our bodies collapsing to the ground in exhaustion. We lay there for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the night fading into the distance as we caught our breath. But even as we lay there, our hearts still pounding in our chests, we knew that the horror was far from over. For somewhere out there, in the darkness of the forest, the man still lurked, his rage simmering like a coiled serpent, waiting to strike again. And so we huddled together, our minds reeling with fear and uncertainty, as the darkness of the night closed in around us like a shroud. And as the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, we knew that we would never be the same again. For in the heart of the forest on that fateful night in mid-October, we had come face to face with true terror and emerged forever changed.
This happened in 1993. Back then, I co-owned a gas station in a small town you've probably never heard of before. We didn't have many employees at the time, and so I often found myself working the register through the night. We weren't one of those 24-hour gas stations, but we did stay open till 3 a.m. I remember one night working the register, looking at the clock and seeing it hit 2:30. I hadn't seen a customer in probably 30 minutes to an hour. I started organizing the shelves, getting the place ready to close up. As I stood in the corner of the building, to my surprise, I heard the door chime telling me a customer had entered. I walked around a shelf to greet them. It was a man. He had a tall and skinny build, wearing sweatpants and a light-colored t-shirt. His clothes were covered in blood stains. I was frozen and felt a sudden surge of concern, wondering who hurt the guy. Breathing heavily, he told me that he had just been in a car crash. I went to the back room, assuring him that we had a first aid kit. I offered to call for an ambulance, but he adamantly refused any medical attention or the police, instead asking me to show him to the bathroom. I pointed to the corner of the store where it was located. As he walked there, a few more times he told me not to call the police. I understood not wanting to get the police involved, but it started to concern me how many times he felt he needed to tell me. I started thinking about it more, and that's when I had the realization. Despite the bloodstains, I hadn't seen any actual visible wounds. Additionally, the man was walking almost perfectly normal for just having been in a car crash. My heart started racing. I ran outside and to the side of the building where our payphone was. I dialed 911. A female dispatcher answered. I relayed what had just occurred in a quiet tone, explaining how the man was still inside the building in the bathroom. The lady was silent for a few seconds before I was informed of a recent stabbing homicide that had occurred in the next town over, reported only 30 minutes ago. I asked for a description of the suspect, and to my horror, the woman proceeded to describe the man I had just seen. Tall, skinny, in gray sweatpants and a light-colored t-shirt. I asked for officers immediately and was told to wait in my car with the doors locked. In less than 10 minutes, there were 5 cop cars in front of my store. Guns drawn, the police entered the building. I stayed outside with another officer giving my statement, but I was interrupted by the abrupt commotion from inside. The man in the bathroom had reportedly jumped at one of the officers with a knife as they opened the bathroom door. However, he was soon overpowered by 5 or 6 more officers. He was handcuffed and stuffed inside one of the patrol vehicles. Needing to know, I couldn't help but ask one of the officers that had gone inside what the man was doing in there. He revealed that the man had injected himself with drugs, planning to emerge from the bathroom with a knife, attacking me and taking off with the store's money. A decade later, I got curious and did some digging on the guy. He was charged with the murder of a Dairy Queen employee in the next town over and is serving life in prison.